Hola, soy Felipe Heuser, director de Súbela. Hoy día tenemos el honor de recibir acá en los estudios de Súbela a dos representantes del Premio Nobel de la Paz. Está con nosotros Kirill Martynov, periodista, editor del Novoya Gazeta Europa, el medio independiente más antiguo y más leído de Rusia, que a través de su editor en jefe, Dmitry Muratov, fueron reconocidos con el Premio Nobel el año 2021. Y también está con nosotros Pavel Andreyev. Él es uno de los directores de la organización sin fines de lucro Memorial, una fundación creada en Rusia el año 1987 en el contexto de caída la Unión Soviética, y que han dedicado todo su trabajo a promover los derechos humanos y también investigar y denunciar los crímenes de lesa humanidad. La organización Memorial fueron reconocidos como Premio Nobel de la Paz del año 2022, y estamos acá en Súbela para poder tener una conversación respecto a la actualidad en Rusia y sobre también los desafíos de los derechos humanos y de los medios de comunicación, tanto en Rusia como en el mundo. Así que muy bienvenidos, Kirill y también Pavel, por estar aquí en Súbela. Welcome to you both to Súbela.
Thank you for inviting.
Yeah, nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So we're going to do this interview in English so we can get the conversation going. First, I want to start with you, Kirill. You are the editor-in-chief for Europe of Novaya Gazeta. So it's, as we just said, it's the longest-standing Russian journal, independent journal. It has been recognized globally for their great work in journalism, but also, as we know, at great cost for doing journalism and for covering human rights and for committing to truth. So my question is, what is your vision today of the media landscape in Russia, understanding the cost that it takes to do good journalism?
Yes, the crucial point for the history of media in Russia, it was last year. At one moment, Russian authorities decided basically to destroy media landscape at all, to ban any independent journalism, and they did it by very simple and, let's say, barbaric law, which forced people, if you want to cover war or consequences of war against Ukraine, you have a legal obligation to use only one official source of information, and the source is Russian Ministry of Defense, and it's, like official statements. And this is, totally useless and like totally insane, because they are the site of the conflict, they are always lies, and they never provided real information. For example, I was still in Russia for the first week of the war, and I had a kind of right, like a journalist, to address officials and to ask them, to call them, to provide us like public information. So I asked Russian Ministry of Defense how many people were basically killed during the war, first days of the war. Yeah. It's important information we all want to know. Like Russian families ask this question, and they just, they just ignored it. And after that, they created this law, which basically stop you from being a professional journalist. You still can cover some, some topics like ecology, I don't know, city development, whatever. Even you can, predict who will win on next Russian elections. Like, maybe it will be some surprises, but it will not. Yeah. We know that the next president of Russia will be against President Putin. But if you want to cover the topic number one, the war, they just bring you in jail up to 10 years just for doing your professional job. If you want to use different sources, you are a criminal for Russian government. Yeah. And this is ended for now. It's ended like this. We have 300 of media shut it down. We have only, officially we have only state propaganda in the country. They wanted to create a totally isolated media landscape. And most of my colleagues are working in exile right now. which has, well, at least we don't have to follow this wartime censorship.
Yeah. So speaking about the war, obviously here in Chile, we're very, very far away from Russia and from Ukraine. And most of the information we have from either media outlets or even digital is mostly from Western sources. So giving that context, what would you say, giving your obvious close ties to Russia and to the society in general, what is currently the state of the art of the war and where is it heading towards?
I'd like to mention that we have also brilliant Ukrainian sources working with English language quite well, like Kyiv Independent, for example. I highly recommend them. So if you're not, if you want to take a closer look on the war from the people who are victims of the war, just read, Ukrainian sources. But the current state of the war is like this. Putin can't stop this war. He doesn't want, he don't understand how to do it. He is in fear of his personal power. And that is the main reason why hundreds and probably thousands of people are dying every day or every week, just in tries of occupy and conquer some medium towns on Ukrainian territory, day by day and week by week. And Putin already, it seems for me quite clear that Putin already lost the war he started, because he started, short and brilliant war. He can win easily. It never happens. And for now, he has no resources, to have some great new offensive on Kyiv or whatever.
Yeah. Pavel, I understand you currently live in Russia. Is that true, or you're moving?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I hope to have a chance to come back, but nobody knows.
So, in giving obvious your ties and family and the work you've done in memorial all these years, what is it like today, also in the context of the war, to live in Russia? And to what Kirill was saying, who today or which sectors of society support Putin and which sectors don't? And why?
Yeah, several questions. I think if you are inside of Russia, it's your feelings. It's totally depend how deeply you consume news. If you consume news, you just will be in the terrible conditions, because like that you just cannot imagine how stressful it for people inside to every day read news about death, destroying of the cities, killing people from both sides, and just and of course the high level of repressions, because like every morning I wake up, especially here in South America, when I have 6 hours less than in my home, so it's already middle of the day, and I almost every day get news about that this person was arrested, another was prosecuted, and it's like the terrible, especially for those who are contributing independent source of information. But the majority of the public, they just keep live their daily normal life without with the small changes. Yeah, so you don't have McDonald's, but they replaced with other burgers. You don't have IKEA now in Russia, but in many countries you didn't have also before, and it was and the majority of the country is like that. You need to understand that they're poor people, so they bought the cheapest food before this Russia-Ukraine war, and they still go into the cheapest shops, and they don't see the high differences of it. But if you consume news, it's like the terrible, and especially for those who were opponents of this Putin decision, because they feel very high stress, and lots of families were destroyed because of conflicts inside. For example, mothers decided not to talk with their children, and some brothers decided to lost the connections. And of course, many Russians have ties with Ukrainians, and especially in the beginning, it was lots of calls between each other, because that I will say that in the first weeks, people just had a dream that we can, stop it with the communication, and unfortunately, it didn't. It didn't happen. But about the stress, just an example, that the fear, it's a very important word to describe the feelings of many people. because of this terrible news about the censorship and arrests, thousands or even million people every day go to sleep with the things and the thoughts that maybe at 5 or 6 o'clock police will knock to their doors, do research in their flats, and keep them to the police stations without chance to come back. And it's like that for millions of Russians.
Both of you mentioned in your answers the importance of independent media. My question is, in thinking also from the context of Latin American media outlets, what does it mean to be, and this is an open question to both of you, what does it mean to be an independent media? Obviously in the context of Russia, one could interpret to be independent from the government and from the narrative that the government is trying to impose or trying to frame. But beyond that as well, from perhaps a more global perspective, what does it mean to be an independent media? Or is there even such thing as being independent, right? Or having a editorial line and so on? And maybe how does that contrast with other big media outlets such as RT, for example, in Russia?
Well, I probably simplify the situation, but for me, independent medias are those which work for public good. That means they are always on the side of people and not on the side of any kind of government or, huge organizations or big companies or something like this. Because I think we all need to have some institutions which, stop these powerful structures, to put too much pressure on human life. So media, for me, independent media is those which, stop big guys from doing bad things. Or at least if we can stop them, like in case of President Putin right now, we have to, we have the full list, provide the full list of the crime provided by this big guy, that everyone will know the situation quite well. And I think that independent media really exist. It's hard to beat them. In our case, when we are 60 journalists moving abroad without any investments, without, some passports or papers to stay for long outside Russia in the European Union. And it is my joke, it's a kind of my joke for this year, that I probably prefer to be a kind of more dependent, but I don't have this opportunity. We are totally cut off Russian media market. We are living in different countries, and we're just trying to bring information back to Russian public.
Right. So it's the idea of facing the big guy, and that big guy can be the government, or it could be a group of companies that control the market. Or so it's the big guy more than public or private necessarily, right?
Yeah, and I even can imagine that at some point independent media can, have some collaborations, but with these kind of big guys, but only in terms in the situation when we have, common public interest. So, for example, European Union in this situation is our partner, and they support us, and we like the idea of this group of countries which work together for more peaceful future for people. But we are not work for them, and if they do some bad things, we will say it, because we have common interest, but we are independent media.
Yeah.
So I want to add that because I also had 10 years experience in managing the media office. It's like that. I think that regarding the independence, the most important word is diversity. Diversity in the market, but also diversity of different media, but also the diversity of your sources of funds. And if you have diversity of funds, you can be, and if you can tell, for example, no to any person who provides you funds in several cases, because you have different ones, and you can just replace, you can lose 10 or 15 or 20% incomes without losing the ability to keep your going on, to keep your work going on. You can be named as as independent. And this is what was this the situation in Russia when the government tried to isolate medias from the independent sources of funding. That's why they adopted the foreign agent law, but also it was a huge pressure on businessmen not to invest in media, not to put advertising in independent media, and it was pressure, and it was accepted not only by Russian oligarchs, it also was accepted by, United States or European big companies who, till the last year, they put so many advertising on Russian propagandistic channel, but they never, for last 7 years, or just almost never put their advertising in independent sources, like for example, in Novaya Gazeta or in the journal where I work.
So adding up to this idea of a more diverse landscape, so there's more information, more sources, more different points of view, probably the phenomenon of digital media is important to that idea of having more opinions and more sources. Us here at Súbela, we're a native digital media organization. We were born digital. We've been around for about 10 years. And we are also facing a lot of different problems than traditional media organizations face. We face issues of an audience that is always distracted and you need to get their attention. We also face the increasing costs of investing in good journalism where there's no actually advertising for those spaces. We also work in a sphere where there's so much misinformation that it's difficult to tell truth from wrong. So from your experience in the media space and the civil society space as well, and you've seen several organizations, either media or NGOs in the digital space, what do you think are the main kind of opportunities, but also the challenges that these new breed of digital organizations are facing, maybe in general and Russia in particular?
Well, my idea here is that we have, a coincidence of two types of media crises at more or less the same years. One, this general crisis of mainstream media, the rise of distrust them, the destruction of attention of general public, and rise of fakes and disinformation on social media. Because I support the idea of Pavel that diversity is good, but I also think that the problem is we still need some common agenda, general agenda, which is important to the public in general, which we discuss and so on. Because if everyone will be just diverse, that means that we don't have any real society. Everyone just live in their own informational bubbles. And the other crisis was specifically Russian, at least for last years. It was direct attack from rising dictatorship on media landscape. And this attack was on it provided on different levels. They invest insane money in state TV propaganda, so they somehow control a lot of agenda. They try to disinform all the world with the so-called media and journalism like RT, and they work directly for Russian disinformation. For disinformation, paid basically by Russian people, by the taxes, and invested, that it's insane, people in South America got disinformation paid by Russian taxpayers,
Yeah.
So why should we do this? And also, Russian government experimented a lot with fakes on social media. They invented this idea of state-paid trolls, who spread disinformation on media, and they also basically destroyed all real source of information in the country. And it was coincidence, at like 5 years probably, or 10 years. So I think our experience is really bad, and I think that we have the same problems like yours, and we also have dictatorship. And right now we think how to recreate all, how to do media landscape by itself, by yourself, like a little bit of anarchy, without helps of big businesses or something like this.
And what do you think, Pavel, about this digital landscape and this common agenda that Kirill was mentioning?
Yes, I think I agree with Kirill that we live in a very parallel world. In our world is the world of censorship, and there is other challenges. But if you are talking about free media, media of challenges of media in the free world, I think the most important thing is to work with your community to understand who is your main audience, and you should know who is that important part of the audience and who just the trolls or just people who came to you not to read the independent or just very important investigation, but just to have fun and for 5 seconds. And I think that is a very important task for the managers and for the editors to find this community, to ask them what they want to consume, but also in what they can participate and how they can support the media. So that's the main thing, trust and support from the audience.
So I want to connect this to the idea of diversity in media, diversity of also opinions, of editorials, where we could discuss openly and democratically, to another notion of diversity, of the different sectors of society. And from what we've seen in Russia, one of those sectors that has been heavily attacked, at least narratively and sometimes also physically, is the gay community, the lesbian community, the transgender community, the LGBTQ community in general. This is a topic that we cover a lot here in Súbela that is very important to us. So what is it today to be a member of that community in Russia, these days?
This community is totally forbidden, since last 2 months, I think. So any mentioning of LGBT relationships is totally against the law now. For example, if you translate from Russian to from English to Russian or from other foreign language a book, if you translate it to Russian, and if the publisher offices see that something what's described there is looks like, for example, gay relations, it will be cut off from this book, and they print a book without mention in this piece.
Oh.
And everything, and the same thing is happening with TV shows, with films, and it's mention of it becomes totally banned with it, and the companies can be fined with enormous amount of money, dozens of thousands you will pay if you will not follow this law. This is for companies, but the persons, especially on some regions, for example, in the North Caucasus, who just represent them as gay, they are can be physically attacked. For example, we had several stories of the killing of honors, of the persecuting of gays, on Putin there in the prisons only because of they put the conversations in some chats, and it was show that some policemen thought that it's something with a gay lesbian stuff like this, and that's a terrible situation. And Kirill, I think, can add more because they did a great investigation about it.
Yeah. Strangely speaking, LGBT topic is a kind of central for Putin personalistic dictatorship, because they always insist, people around Putin always insisted that that are against West, because West have some strange values, not ours. We don't need to do. We don't live like in the Western countries. And when they ask directly, but what do you mean by so-called traditional values? Why are you fighting with West? What basically you want? The only concrete answer is we don't like gays. So it's as simple as this. They just provide this idea that if you are a man, you should be a man. You have to serve in army. You need to bring money to home. You have no ideas of if you can live some other life. If you are a woman, you have to born child, to cook and so on, and that they call traditional values. And basically, the whole idea behind Putin rule is basically, strangely speaking, homophobia. I even don't understand how it works. Basically, I don't understand how you can build a real dictatorship on the base of such stupid idea.
Yeah.
Like, you know, totally useless in any sense. But for some part of Russian population, this idea is, you know, very concrete and pleasant. Like, I don't know if this is a majority of people, I don't think so. And we have even worse cases, like Pavel already mentioned. We have a very dark region, like hard region of Russian Federation, Chechnya. And the governor of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, claimed 6 years ago that in Chechnya there are no LGBT at all. All of us are totally straight, you know. Like
Declared.
He just checked, you know. And we started to investigation this declaration, and we found that, you know, in the 21st century in Russia, they have secret prison to torture and kill people just because they are LGBT. So we investigated this. We, you know, bring all attention of international community. It was several years before the war. And we helped, well, what is good in this story, we helped more than 100 of people to leave Russia and to live normal life, you know. Because, well, for me, I don't know the idea behind homophobia anyway, but I'm pretty sure that most Russians never really supported the idea that people can be tortured and killed just because of their sexual orientation.
Yeah. I have one last question that is open to you both, and I want to connect some of the things we have discussed to Chile. Over the past years, Chile has been in a very intense social and political atmosphere. We had a social outburst in 2019 that led to a cross-political agreement of all sectors to draft a new constitution, or kind of in Russo's terms, like a new social contract. It hasn't been easy. We're still going through the process. And probably one of the main challenges we're facing is the polarization of society and the, at some level, contrast or collision of different visions of the society or of the future of our society or the different values that we should embrace. Many of them being shared, but also many of them, again, quite in contrast. So my question is that, giving also in the context of last year's death of Mikhail Gorbachev, who from at least the Western viewpoint is seen as an important symbol of this transition of Russian society from the Soviet Union towards a new Russia. But underneath, and in the context of the conversation about diversity and LGBTQ and so on, there are different visions of Russia today. Not just that support or are against Putin, but that have maybe different ideas of what should Russia be like in the future. So my question is, what are those main ideas or visions of Russia that exist today within the people of Russia that are in contrast or in collision, at least in narrative terms?
I think that I'm not so deeply in Chile, you know, inner politics and all this stuff. But as I see from the Russian perspective, and I see that we also have now a super polarized society, and we are just many people now, some of them very afraid, some of them like think about it skeptical, but somebody very proactive about, you know, civilian war. I would say that people would like to, and many just promote, you know, killing each other like the best solution for solving the problem. And I think that please, you know, see our example, and just I can advise that you can have lots of different opinions, you know, lots of controversials, but they not should be dealt with the violence. But I think that it's very important for the whole society to understand that violence, it's not acceptable. So like that, if you will try to solve the problem with the violence, you will just bring, you know, much more problem that you promised. This is what like the Putin did in this case. You know, that unbelievable what's happening now. But regarding the society, I'm a little bit optimist. Just for example, I fly in here and I'm reading a book of Mark Ramon from the United States, and he described his history in the 70s. And he's like this. It's also what was the time when United States discussed LGBT topics, and it was like the only first example when people just did public coming outs, and then it was like there lots of discussions about post-Vietnam War and also controversials. And I saw that even in the punk community there was a different views on these topics. And that when I was reading his dialogues in 70s and the beginning 80s in the United States, I totally can compare. It's like that what's going on now in Russia, because like all these topics became important. People after the war, our attitudes to the soldiers, to our troops, to the troops of the enemy, and all these all these questions about civil rights. And I see there is lots of connections. So I think yes, Russian society is like that can be compared with many Europeans or United States societies, but like 50 years before, which is a lot for the human being. But this is very short in the times of the history. So I think that changes in society happening slowly. And what I'm sure that we shouldn't equate Putin and Russia, and shouldn't equate Kremlin and Russian society, because Russian society much more diverse, much more have lots of opinions inside, but the Russian society is totally unrepresented in parliament and totally unrepresented in policy decision making.
Right.
Pavel thinks that Russian society is more or less like European or American society for 40, 50 years old, and my concern is that it probably more like 80 years old. Some of European society, not to mention it here. I will be really happy if Russia can be democratic country, a good friend and partner for all neighbors and all countries in the world, which provide best opportunities for the young people to educate yourself and so on. And I will try to do what is my in my charge to do it possible. But I see the future of Russia, sadly speaking, very grim. I think that Putin is not only destroying Ukraine right now, but he also destroys the future for Russia generation. He won't, bring young people, simply speaking, back to Soviet Union. He wants to isolate country. He won't have his power forever, and he really believes that violence is a good way how to deal with things. He believes he is a kind of dictator from 19th century, which is dividing world. This is mine. Don't use it. This is yours. He has no ideas about collaboration, how contemporary world is working, or social media, or whatever. And I probably, think that if I may, I have a kind of call for Chilean people, because I think that people in Chile know very well what is dictatorship and how these things destroy people and oppress them. And I think that in this situation we need to have full empathy to Ukrainians, because simply speaking, if we simplify the situation, they consider President Putin like the same dictator who invaded your families, destroy your houses, destroy your lives, send you to prisons. That is what's happening right now with Ukrainians in Europe, just several hundreds kilometers from other European countries on our eyes.
Kirill, Pavel, thanks so much for being here, for sharing with us your work, also your vision for the future of Russia and the work of journalism and human rights advocates. We have been pleased to have you here, and also we want to extend congratulations for the work you've done and you will keep doing. And again, thanks so much for being here, for sharing with us. And I hope you have a great stay in Chile with great conversations ahead. I know you have a very intense agenda, so the best of luck. And again, thank you very much for being with us. Y al resto que vio esta entrevista, darle las gracias por estar con nosotros acá en Súbela. Tuvimos una conversación abierta y muy interesante con Kirill y Pavel, la cual va a estar disponible en todas las plataformas de Súbela. Muchas gracias.